I wish we had all of Melbourne here to talk, because I'm about encouraging conversation about this topic, hence the title. So I want to start with, first of all, I'll acknowledge the land on which we stand on, the land of the Wurundjeri people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I understand, of course, that they cared for this country for a long time, and how good job they did. My wife Anne and I, we used to live in North Warrandyte, and one of the joys of living in the bush, as I was the wildlife. So this is one of the pieces of wildlife. This is a swamp wallaby. We called him Wallace because he comes into our front garden regularly and he nibbles all the plants, particularly the ones that Anne just planted. So Anne would go out in the morning, inspect what had been eaten, and other words that I can't repeat publicly. But what a thrill it was to see him coming into our garden. So this is Wallace. It's also called a bicolour wallaby, or a swamp wallaby. I was delighted to see him. There he is, off into the bush. We made a mistake at our place in Warrandyte of putting a frog pond outside our bedroom window. Do not do it, because the frogs would call at night. And this was the loudest caller. This is a poppawonk frog, or also called the banjo frog. And the males would call, and their call is a very simple one: bonk, bonk. And then occasionally you would hear bonk, 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 bonk. I'm told that would be two males competing for attention because they're trying to find a mate. It's not one calling, it's two calling. So I would occasionally go out, stand beside the pond and go bonk, and there were a response by the frog, thinking I was a competitor. I'm not quite sure how foolish or whether I should be honoured that he's having a conversation with me.
Just don't kiss one.
Don't kiss one, I promise not to. We had in the bush in front of our place powerful owls. This is Australia's largest owl. It's about 2 feet or 60 centimetres tall. It's quite a big animal. And there were a pair, male and female. The male's the one with the possum in his talons, and he was feeding the female. We were delighted they were there. And in fact, we would watch one of the tall manigums on the river there. And there was a hollow at the top. The hollow was filled recently with sulphur-crested cockatoos, but eventually the owls took over. And we were delighted when a little owlet popped out of the hole at the top. And then a week later, a second one popped out. And a week later, they fenced and we said goodbye to the owls. It was a real thrill to have these animals close by in our backyard. Perhaps I should say we were living in their backyard. In fact, they felt so much at home, maybe we were the tenants and they were the landlords. I want to ask a question to help me focus is, I know that most of you are here because you've thought about the issue of growth population, but how many here have had conversations with their family and their friends on the topic? Put your hand up if you had a conversation with you. Great. I'm going to encourage everybody to keep talking about it. And that's the purpose of this talk. And this is a talk that I will give essentially to community groups to encourage them to talk about this topic. So I've got my little agenda. What am I going to talk about? I'm going to explain why I'm talking, my little background, so a little bit of a snapshot of why I got to this spot. I'm going to talk about the issue globally, in Australia, a little bit about climate change, a little bit about what's happening in Melbourne, mention some of the opposing arguments, and homework for you. You thought this was a homework-free lecture, isn't it? You have assignments. So my background, as Richard started off, first of all, I studied physics and maths and economics. I worked on the wrong side, I worked on the dark side, in coal mining and LNG shipping with Shell for 27 years. And then I took a job with the state government at the time of when Steve Bracks won power to lead the project to restore the Snowy. And I enjoyed all those bits. And then I became Richard mentioned the Riverkeeper, which was a community group. It wasn't. It was a not-for-profit, and that was the best job I had. I held it for 10 years, and it meant giving talks, and yelling and screaming, and meeting politicians to focus on one aspect of our environment, something local, like our wonderful river, Yarra River. Why am I here? At university, I was influenced strongly by Paul Ehrlich's book. I've got a copy there. Very tattered, been read many times. We wrote that in the late 1960s, raising the issue of population growth. And then, a few years later, the group by the Meadows couple got commissioned by the Club of Rome to write this book about limits to growth. They're the ones that influenced me in my younger years. That influence has stayed with me since. I joined, there's a group called Zero Population Growth. I'm not quite sure if you're aware, that was really a forerunner of SPA. And I joined this, and this would been some of the people who ran it at the time. It was Derek Llewellyn-Jones and John Cookler, both passed on now. I only met Derek, I didn't meet John. This is back in the early 70s. The job then was, as is today, writing letters, giving talks. I was only in the 20s then, and I was in fact the leader of the Victorian branch for a little short while. And one of the protests we attended was at the screening of this Hollywood movie called ZPG. It didn't make the Oscars, but it was a story, and we had a protest outside the cinema capturing the moviegoers because the film was about babies are banned. And we thought that was a bit of an exaggeration. ZPG isn't about banning babies or making sure that no one's born. So we wanted to get a message, but it was a total failure because to try and convince cinema goers to stop and talk was impossible. That was one of our few protests. And then, more recently, I went back to uni again and did a Master of Environment course, and I focused on the issue of population, particularly the way the media talks about it. In fact, it was here I gave a talk about the results of this research was what does the media talk about when it talks about growing population, and why is it so biased in its views? And we'll come on to that. So, that's my background, that's why I'm here. Global picture, this is the most familiar graph you will see of the rapid growth in recent decades of the human population. And, of course, in my time, it's gone from 2.5 billion to 8.3. Dramatic. In fact, when I talk to community groups, they're familiar with the graph, but to realise that within one lifetime, albeit I'm old now, a threefold increase is quite dramatic. I want to talk about animals because my interest in this topic is primarily about nature. I'm not driven so much by economics or there are many social issues, but I want to talk about the nature one. I think one of the amazing stats is this idea of us versus all the other mammals. Now, they've weighed, well, I don't know how you weigh the animals in the world. I'm not quite sure how you get a tiger to sit still on the scales, but they say that the weight of wild mammals is about 10 million tonnes. How does that compare to humans? Well, we weigh more than them. Our weight is bigger than all the wild mammals. And you look at our stock, that's primarily cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, horses, dogs and cats, so forth, even more. So it's dramatic how much we've taken over from wildlife. I tell a fib. Those figures are for 1900. These are the figures for 2000. We and our stock weigh 96% of the weight of all mammals. It's quite dramatic how much we've taken over nature, such that they only account for 4% of the weight of mammals. The data on bird life is similar, that's just mammals. It's estimated that soon, I'm not quite sure what it is, that the mass of farmed poultry is more than twice that of all wild birds. Again, it's dramatic how much we have taken over the wildlife. And of course, the consequence is, with nature being squeezed out, we're losing species. In fact, the number of wild populations has dropped. That's what sure did that one. And we're losing species on a daily basis. I want to mention one of the species. This is the, I've got to get the pronunciation right. It's a kua-i-uu bird. It's a songbird. It's indigenous to the Hawaiian island of Kauai. Pretty bird, and like many species of birds, the male will sing to attract a mate. And so its voice has been recorded. The last recording was in 1987. That's the last recording. That male was singing. There was no one to answer. There were no females left. I'll just bring back, that's Hawaii. I'll just talk just briefly about Australia. There are some amazing frog species in Australia. There are two species of gastric brooding frog. What's a gastric brooding frog? It's a frog that has an amazing body. It can convert its stomach into a womb. It can remove the acids to make it a safe spot to raise its young. Incredible. The two species of it are both extinct. We've lost the knowledge that we could have had to tap into how does a frog reduce its acid in its stomach to make it safe for raising young. We've lost them. Of course, it's not just our taking over the space, we're also pretty good at pollution. It's estimated that plastics will soon, in the ocean, will soon outweigh the wildlife. And I love this cartoon, I just image this woman's buying a fish and she asks for a plastic bag. Inside. I'm a keen reader of books on the topic, and this is to Peter Scott, who was the founder of the World Wildlife Fund. He said, we haven't saved a single species, and that was what their job was, to save species. We haven't saved one. If only we put our money into condoms. A concept I want to share about, I'm sure you are familiar. Well, I'm preaching to the converted here, but I want to share with you what I'm saying publicly. The idea of what's the ecological footprint. How much nature do we use as humans? Now, what is the ecological footprint? It's the area of land, biologically productive land, and sea, needed to produce all the renewables we need for food, fibre, water, and so forth, and cope with our waste. And it's estimated that humans require, on average, 2.8 hectares per person. 2.8 hectares are needed to provide the renewable resources, water, food, fibre, and to assimilate our wastes. 2.8 hectares. The trouble is, the planet only has 1.6 hectares, everybody there. So we're already consuming the natural resources, the renewable resources, faster than they're being generated. In fact, based on that, we need 1 3/4 planets to be sustainable just for our renewable resources, let alone the non-renewable ones. And that's for the current population of the world, and its current consumption. And I was asked once by a reporter, what's the name of the second planet? We haven't got, oh, Elon Musk will have an answer, he'll say it's Mars. So we're already in overshoot. This is the concept of overshoot. We're consuming renewable resources faster than they're being renewed. It's like someone going to their ATM and drawing out 1 3/4 of their salary and then blaming the ATM as broken. We are consuming renewable resources faster than renewed. And how can we do it? Because we're eating into the capital. We're taking it away from future generations. We're consuming the capital. Examples like fish stocks are declining, soils being degraded, we haven't got enough fresh water. Of course, the climate's another one. We're degrading the ability of the planet to support life. So we're eating into the capital. And that's the world situation. What about in Australia? Well, I want to talk about Australia's population more so than the global population, because it's generally believed around the world that globally we're overpopulated. It's not generally believed that we're overpopulated, and I will challenge that. If everyone in the world today, the 8.3 billion people, live like the average Australian, we wouldn't need just 1.75 planets, we'd need more than 4. We are consuming the resources 4 times faster than they're being renewed. I mean, Australia leads the world in poisoned animals, sport. We're leading the world in terms of our consumption of nature, consumption of resources. I'm sure you're aware that the federal government, as does the state governments, produce regularly what they call the State of the Environment reports. The federal government releases one every 5 years. The last one was dated 2021, so there's one due out this year, but that one took a year before it was released. In fact, it was produced under the Morrison government, but it took the next government to release it. So this is analysis of the state of our environment in this country. And here's one of the answers. The outlook for environment is deteriorating. No surprise. Look at the news media. We're losing. And it's under extreme pressure. And population growth contributes to all the pressures on our environment. This is in a government report. Each person added to our population increases demand for natural resources, which is fairly obvious, and it's quite good that this commissioned report by the federal government said it. Adding more people is simply making the situation worse. Good report. As you're probably aware, that most of the damage to our environment is because of habitat loss. It's not climate change yet. It's habitat loss. That's the greatest loss of species, and through our consumption of the place for our crops, expanding our cities and so forth. Now, the media's response to the report was pretty minimal. The day it came out, there were articles in the paper, and I think that Tanya Plibersek was then the Environment Minister. She said, I quote her, it said, it told a story of crisis and decline in Australia's environment. And the media ran headlines like, the report shows how Australia's land and wildlife are being destroyed correctly. And the Australian Conservation Foundation said, the report reveals even further declines in the health of our incredible plants, animals and ecosystems. But not the Tanya Plibersek, nor the media, nor the ACF mentioned the finding back before that one of the drivers is our growing population. It was not mentioned, even though it was a key finding from the report. Why is there this silence? I'm sure you have some reasons. Let me offer the ones that I say publicly. Why is there so little criticism of it? Even though the report was critical, why don't the media or the government or environment groups even talk about it? Most environment groups. Well, It's obvious that business loves growth, for obvious reasons. It wants more customers and wants a bigger pool of job seekers. But why does the news media not talk about it? I did this research project back at university 10 years ago, and analysing this. It's because we believe, we have this view that the media should tell the truth and analyse all problems, but no, the media, with one or two exceptions, is privately owned. It has commercial values, it wants advertisers, it makes more money out of advertising than it does out of subscriptions. So it has the same growth ethics of business. So it doesn't want to publish articles which challenge the growth. Why not the government? Government isn't a business. Well, in my view, maybe yours, government today is captured by business. There's so many examples of things that don't... think of the debate about gambling reform. The government is captured by business, contrary to the wishes of the general population. And secondly, it's fixated, and this is mainly a treasury issue. It measures its performance on how big the economy is. So growth is part of its measure of success. An appalling measure of success is this one. So it doesn't push the issue. But you might say, okay, I understand the reasons why the media doesn't want to raise the issues and report on the State of the Environment report, but what about the environment groups? You go back to the 1970s, the time of Paul Ehrlich's report and the limits to growth by Club of Rome. In the 70s, they did talk about it. But not today. And I was on the ACF Council for 3 years, and 2 or 3 others, and I kept trying to say, why aren't we talking about it? Because they used to talk about it, even had a policy challenging growth. They cut it out and they threw away the policy. They pulled it off its website. Reason? They didn't want to appear racist. They didn't want to appear to be a friend of Pauline Hanson. Because they felt that if you talk about population, you automatically fall into discussion about immigration. And if you criticise immigration, you must be racist. And secondly, the ACF, like many environment groups, accepts corporate donations with strings attached. Don't criticise your donors. Don't criticise their values. So they're worried that if they raise the issue that growth is bad, you're criticising your donors. And that was the 2 appalling reasons why the ACF didn't raise it and doesn't raise it. If you remember the ACF, you tell them you're pissed off at them, gutless for not talking about a clear driver of environmental decline. You were familiar with graphs about our growth in numbers in Australia. Just recently it's been estimated, it's not yet proven, but estimated that we've reached the 28 million mark. You go back a few years and the forecast was, in the intergeneration report, it would be 25 million by 2042. We hit that mark 24 years early. So even the government's forecast understated the growth rate. And this is its current projection. It's a mathematical projection, it's not a forecast. They don't say, oh, it's just mathematics based on immigration rates and birth rates and death rates. That will be at 41 million in less than 40 years' time. That's the current planning basis for the government. Pretty dramatic increase. What does that mean? Well, it means we've got to squeeze in another Sydney and another Melbourne and another Perth. In the life of your children and grandchildren, we'll have these extra cities, or those cities will be twice as big. That's what that projection means. I think that's terrible. That's nightmarish. And of course, water is one of the parameters. We're currently now at the stage where there's no more fresh water around to use. So all the cities are now talking about desalination. We've hit some limits, and we're still projecting those sort of numbers. For those, and this is for the general public, they might say, well, where's the growth coming from? Now, births have dropped. Surely we need migrants to fill the gap because there's so few births. Well, wrong. But we still have natural increase, which is the grey line here. That's births in excess of deaths. fertility rates below replacement, we still have more births and deaths because we keep having more mothers, mainly from migrants. And of course, the other component, which is the bigger component, is migration, or the immigration minus the immigration, the net migration. That's a typical. It's a fairly deceptive graph. I want to pause and say I'm not critical of migrants. I want to explain why. I'm critical of the government, not the migrants. The migrants are doing what any family would do. Find a better place to live, find a more comfortable and secure environment for their children, more opportunities for having a better life. So it's understandable that many people want to come to Australia. Don't blame them. We'll come on to who do we blame? We blame the government, but I'll talk about that. So don't blame them, but I want to show that the migration numbers are huge. Now that graph is a little bit deceptive, and you'll see it repeated in the paper because often they show just that. They show just that and say, oh look, we're returning migration back to its normal level. Well, this is when Howard came in and he trebled the size of the migration program, and every government since has kept on that. So you keep saying, well, currently Albanese says we're reducing migration by 40%. From there down to a sustainable level and normal. Well, what's normal? Back here it averaged 70 or 80,000. Here it averaged 200,000, and they say if we get it down to sort of 220,000, it's normal and sustainable. It's rubbish. It's playing with the figures. It also keeps talking about increases. Where's the decrease bit? It's not on the graph because they're talking about pluses, not negatives. And the government's view is contrary to public opinion surveys. I'm sure you're aware and you keep reading about various surveys. I won't go through these. A whole lot of surveys often will ask the question, should we have more, do we need more people? Are you happy with the size of our migration program? The majority is saying, no, I'm not happy with big Australia. I'm not happy with the size of our migration program. We don't need more people. That's the majority view. The government is ignoring that. It's pursuing growth, and one reason because business loves it. So this means that we're probably familiar with Kathy Betts, the Australian Population Research Institute, Bob Brewer, Kathy Betts. But these others are external ones. Some of them are right-wing groups. Resolve is the one that the Age uses. But even they talk about the fact that the majority of people believe we have a growth problem with numbers. I want to just touch on climate. Where are we going for time? Okay. Because often people say, oh, you're interested in environment, you must be worried about climate. Yes, I am. But then the conversation stops because many people think it's the only environmental issue. The focus on climate change is appropriate, but not the only focus. There are many other environmental issues. And the predominance, and you read the media, is all about clean energy. Good. Clean energy is important. It's all about lowering our greenhouse gas emissions. A lot of debate about this. Renewable energy. Well, let's just do a little bit of analysis. My background's mathematics. I'm sorry you have a formula coming out next. Beware. Total emissions. We try to reduce our total emissions of greenhouse gases. That's the goal. The government set one. The Liberal Party was not quite sure. Pauline Hanson says don't do it at all. We can say our total emissions is the emissions per capita, the average per person, and the size of our people. How many people there are? How many consumers, how many emitters times emissions per person. Fairly simple formula, not too complicated. What's the government and the media doing? It's focusing on that. Because clean energy will reduce the emissions per capita, and also a little bit behaviour change, try and reduce your energy consumption per person. Their focus is entirely that. There's no mention in the media that we have to as well reduce that. We might reduce that a little bit, and we have in fact done it with renewable energy. solar panels and wind power and so forth. But if we save 10% there and we have a 10% increase there, we're back to where we were. And in fact, the government's not just not addressing it, it's doing the opposite. It's not ignoring it, it's boosting it. So our ability to reduce emissions is totally frustrated by the growth in the number of people emitting. For climate activists and the government's program to ignore that, I think is false. It's an omission, it's neglecting one of the key factors. It's a number of people emitting carbon emissions. I love this study by a European academic analysing many of the behavioural changes that have been recommended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And you're probably familiar with them because they're talked about in the media and ACF and so forth, you know, recycle, buy a more efficient car, meat-free diet, so forth, all these things. And they've estimated what would be the reduction in your per capita emissions if you did those things. And you can see that the biggest one there is living car-free. Well, here's another. Having one less child. Having one less child is 20 times more effective than living car-free. Having one less child is 70 times more effective in reducing CO2 than having a non-meat diet. But get the media and the farmer groups to talk about that, they won't. The relationship between population growth and climate change is so clear, isn't it disgraceful that it's not talked about? And that study is not being disputed, it's fact. You're probably familiar with the International Panel of Climate Change. I think that's what the title is, IPCC. They produced a report. This is a gathering of a huge number of scientists working on climate change. And they released their last report, I think that's the last report, in 2022. It's a very bulky document. It's huge. And so they produced a summary, then they produced a summary for the media, and the media just picks up the summary. The summary is edited by the governments that contribute to IPCC. So the scientists produced the main report, but the summary is a censored version of the findings. This particular statement in the main report, globally, GDP per capita and population growth remain the strongest drivers of CO2 emissions. Fairly strong statement. And I'm sure you can't disagree with it. So it's those drivers of fossil fuel. That statement was not in the summary. It was edited out by the government census. And so the media never found it. Because the media reporter won't read the 1,000 pages or whatever the report was, just read the summary. That statement was missing. I'm an admirer of many environmentalists. Love the work of Jane Goodall, who passed away in recent times. She didn't go very public on this issue, but she did say that our population growth underlies just about every single one of the problems we're inflicting on the planet. David Attenborough is a bit more vocal in recent times, not originally. I've never seen a problem that wouldn't be easier to solve with fewer people. He hasn't seen any problem which is easier to solve. Would be easier. The same problem becomes harder and ultimately impossible when more people are involved. These are heroes, and they're saying the right thing. It's great to know that. Belief in infinite growth, well, that's what the government does. It says we've got to keep growing. So they don't say when are we going to stop. So they believe it's going to continue. They want it to continue. Well, it's a strange belief on a finite planet. I'm not normally a fan of economists. Any economists here in the group? It's not against the law. Thank you for being here with me. Economics is still legal. But one of them, Kenneth Boulding, said, anybody who believes in indefinite growth is anything physical on a physically defined planet is either mad or an economist. So next time you have a conversation with somebody and they say we have to have infinite growth, you can easily accuse them of being an economist or mad.
You know the accounting joke about economists. If you laid all the economists in the world end to end, they still wouldn't reach a conclusion.
Good point. Good point. There's another American professor, Alf Barnett. He gave lectures. He was in Colorado, I think, and he talks about exponential growth. It's the greatest shortcoming of humanity. He has a wonderful. He gave a presentation almost 2,000 times to students over his life, and he talked about exponential growth. Even a small one, like growing at 1% or 2%. It's amazing how it takes off. Exponential growth. Let me explain. Australia's currently population is growing. Well, the last few years it's grown on average about 1.5% per annum. If we keep going at that rate, at the end of this century we'll have 83 million in Australia. 83 million if we keep growing 1.5%. If it keeps growing the next century, we would have 368 million. To talk about percentage growth as keeping going is absurd. Can you imagine Australia at 368 million? Can you imagine even 83 million? And that would be in the life of probably our great-grandchildren. Exponential growth is a big problem. I want to just briefly touch on Melbourne. We could talk for ages about the Melbourne issue. I just touch on it and give you one point of view. This is a picture that you took, Graham, I think, from your aeroplane.
I was flying the plane.
You were flying the plane.
I'm glad you were doing
Thank you,
that,
Nick.
not
It's a
taking
great,
photos, Graham.
great picture of that Graham took. Thank you for taking it. So, what's our future under the government's plan? Well, let's talk briefly about the state government's housing plan. Now, it has some important drivers of why the government is focusing on housing. And they're important ones. One is, we do have a serious problem of renters and people not being able to buy a house or even rent a house. They can't afford it. It is a serious social problem. In a wealthy country like today, to know that we have so many people without a home, or people who are struggling to pay the rent, and of course others who can't afford a house even if they've got some money, is a serious problem. I think we should be ashamed of the homelessness in Australia. So this is a real problem, and the government's aware of it. It has a different driver as well. It's projecting that Melbourne will grow to 8 million by 2051. That's not too far away for your kids or grandkids. And of course, there's a third problem. We don't want the city to expand out further over nature and farmland. And so they're the three drivers. The government will talk about those three drivers as driving their housing plan. So what's it going to do? Well, the plan is to build, this is the government's numbers, to build 1.78 million houses in Melbourne, I think it's Melbourne, by that time to accommodate those people. And it's going to do that primarily, not by government funding, by facilitating private multi-storey developments in the middle suburbs, including this suburb here. Not so much the outer suburbs, because in fact the plan is to not have the growth out there. Middle suburbs, particularly Boroondara, Stonnington and so forth, to promote this. I'm sure some of you have got construction in your street, some of you are probably part of the lobby groups that are focusing on this.
If you walk around streets in northern suburbs, there is hardly a street you walk down that doesn't have something knocked down and 2 or 3 or 4 going up on the same line.
Indeed, that's right. Indeed. It's happening. I'm in Kew and I'm just on the edge of the activity centre, and now that my neighbours, it's a street of 1 and 2 storey buildings, and neighbours now have the ability to have a 4-storey building without notifying me, and we're not getting any chance to challenge it. So our street could be, I could have 4 storeys on both sides of me. So it's a serious growth issue the government has. Now, I believe the plan is deceptive. And I'm a little bit aware of deception because I'm actually a bit of an expert at it, deception. My party trick is cards, with playing cards. My family hate it. Whenever my wife checks my pocket to see I don't have a pack of cards in it when I go out, and they have this joke that says, what do you call a magician that loses his magic? Having committed to the magician's oath of not telling how tricks are done, I'll give you a little hint. It is primarily through deception. I'll deceive you by pretending to do something which seems logical, a series of events, and it's logical this will happen, but in fact doing something quite different. So I'll let you focus on a logical projection of steps, but actually doing something quite different. That's what the government's doing. I'll explain. The government's plan is deceptive because it's conflating two quite independent issues. One is the serious housing crisis. Socially disadvantaged people, young people can't find a home, can't put a roof over their head. And that's the public statement. That's what the government says it's doing. But really what it's doing is this. It wants to grow Melbourne to 8 million people. I must say also, this is primarily not Australian residents, this is future residents. These are new arrivals. Our growth is primarily through new arrivals, not for us. So the government prioritising new arrivals over the quality of life for existing Australians. I think it's absurd. I would have thought the Australian government's job was to look after us first. But they're conflating the two issues. They're using this to justify that. And of course, this makes it harder because if you try to squeeze 8 million into Melbourne, more are competing for houses and making it even more difficult for this. So these issues are not just conflated wrongly, but they're in conflict. This is making it harder to provide houses for the needy. So I believe that this is a total deception. And I want you, if you get a chance, to call it out. When the government says we're doing the housing thing because we have a crisis, but they're really doing this. That's the card trick. If I sound a bit angry, it's because I am. Is this Melbourne's future? According to the Cinderella it is. It's St. Paulo in Brazil. This is Tokyo. Is this our future? You look at our government, that's our future. Just keep building. There's more space, just fill it in. Knock down the houses in the street and we'll put up multi-storey buildings. Is this Hong Kong? Is this the future of life? No backyards, high-rise schools, no parks, green areas. That's Hong Kong. Is this our future? This is in Tokyo. I love the Tokyo water park, their advertising statement. Welcome to breathtaking Tokyo water park, where you can wash away the pressure and stress of the overcrowded city and relax with your friends in the soothing environment of sun, fun and splashing. Well, here's a picture of them enjoying themselves in the Tokyo water park. Is that our future? Where we're going, it is.
Yeah, that's Bondi.
This is a beach in South Korea. I have 2 grandchildren. We love to build sandcastles. I'd have real trouble finding a space to build a sandcastle on that beach. Is that our future? This is a highway in Beijing. In fact, there's a traffic jam that lasted several days. I'm not quite sure how the people got water and food for several days locked in their car. That was a traffic jam. We keep building more roads and they get filled. There is a better way. It's hard for me to describe my vision, I'll just do my best, but they aren't the vision I want. They aren't the goalposts we should be aiming at, because that's where we're going at the moment. What's the vision of the future? Well, firstly, I would be challenged every time the government says our measure of success is our economy is getting bigger. I'd say what a terrible, terrible measure. And as an economist, you know all about the shortcomings of GDP. It is a bad measure of well-being, absolutely bad measure. It has a history of why it's there, but it's a bad measure of well-being. And we should get business to focus on quality, not quantity. It's hard because businesses have this DNA of growth. That's part one. And secondly, of course, my vision is we do stabilise our population, maybe even reduce it a bit controversial. And if we do, what's the vision? Well, we won't have the construction same as it is now. Be much more modest. Congestion would be a bit easier. Imagine what 8 million people in Melbourne, which is the government's goal, are going to do to the roads. Then, because their focus is on housing and forgetting all the other things you need to have a life. Where the extra schools going to go, where the extra hospitals are going to go, where the extra cars are going to go. It's just about housing, as though a house is the only thing you need to live. You don't, you need a few other things as well. We will protect our green spaces, and I mean our backyards, our parks, our nature areas, our farmland. If we stabilise the population, we have a chance of protecting it, and we're doing a bad job at the moment. And we would lose no more species. And perhaps we sign a mandate that we share nature's resources with other species. I know it's a bit of a moral issue. I think it's ethical that we should be sharing space, not pushing nature into currently 4% of the space because we've consumed it all. I think that's a fair nugget. Ethically, we should be sharing it. And if we do, future generations will be thankful, because if we don't do it, the problem for them will be much, much worse. I think we are the luckiest generation, and I do fear what my children and grandchildren are going to face when they're at my age. Now you might say, future generations. I love this statement by Groucho Marx. What have we ever done for us? Why should I care about the future? Well, my grandchildren are the reason I get up in the morning. They're the reason I get out of bed in the morning. I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. I have 2 grandchildren, a boy and a girl. Very symmetrical, isn't it? It's my grandson Ollie, who's just about to turn 8, and my granddaughter Evie, she's 3. That photo's some time ago. They're the reason I get up in the morning. And I'm sure for those of you who have children or grandchildren, they produce not just joy for you, but they give you a reason for why you do things. They give me the reason. Okay. I won't labour this, but I will say that when I give these talks with my friends and my family, I get jumped on. The worst I've had is, why don't you kill yourself first? You hate babies, don't you? There are some more, let's say, more rational arguments. I won't go through this, perhaps a question time we do, but you know, we hear the arguments. We need the population growth because it grows the economy. We need migrants to fill jobs. Oh, seems rational arguments. We've got to counter this idea of population ageing. We should blame consumption, not population. We can't stop it. We can fix congestion with decentralisation. I'm not going to answer those questions now, but in the Q&As at the end of my talks, I hope some people will raise some of these. And I'll give an attempt to the answer of these, because they're all fairly rational arguments. So certainly the media is filled with those arguments, particularly the ones like, we need migrants to wipe your bum in the future. I had a challenge. I bumped into Barry Jones, you know, the old Labour leader, gave a talk, and I challenged him about this. He said, Ian, who's going to wipe my bum? I mean, the argument you talk about, I mean, regularly get this one. No, it's not about the number of people, it's just our consumption patterns are just irrational. Well, yes, they are wrong, but there's something else as well, for a number of us. So I won't go into all those, but I will. So I'm into my last slides. Population growth is crushing us, and here's your homework. I hope you're just taking a mental note of your homework. I've got 3 homework assignments for you. Next time we meet, we'll check on those and mark them for you. Okay. Please read up about this. I've got a list of books. I've got a library of books on this, and I've been reading about it since Paul Ehrlich's book in the 60s. There are lots, these are all by Australian authors, by the way. There are lots of international authors as well. A whole bunch of them. I love Paul Collins' book. Paul Collins is one of the patrons of our organisation. there's a great reading. As concerned people as you are, that's why you're here, please continue to learn about the topic and read the opposing people's views so you can understand where they're coming from. Because some of them are very rational, but in my end, they're not rational enough. So your homework is, when you get to Father's Day, it's coming up, or Christmas time, and someone says, what would you like for Christmas? Or Father's Day, put one of these books in. So I've got a list of the books over there. Put one of them on your wish list. Your second homework, and I'm sure this is what I tell community groups, is of course to be aware of this organisation, Sustainable Population, and sign their position statement. And of course we have some eminent people who are our patrons, and it's a great source of data, it's a great source of arguments. We have some very strong contributors to the discussions in SPA, hearing the arguments, listening to some of the talks. So for those of you who haven't signed it, please do encourage others to do it. It's a very rational, well presented document. And your third piece of homework is as follows. Discuss it with your family and friends. Keep talking about it. My wife will shut me up too quickly. She's heard it too often. But so I don't talk to her about it anymore because she knows my view. But all your other friends, family, keep talking about the issue. Explain, use some of these arguments I've got. And look, in fact, I've got not only a flyer, I've also got a side paper I produced on this topic, if you want to see the words I've used from the paper. But when you talk about it, please do not join the Pauline Hanson group and blame others. I repeat, they are doing what is natural. The blame is squarely at the government because it's in the pocket of business, because of their pro-growth policies, both on the economy and on population. Thank you for your time.